was just past midnight, the kind of late hour when the streets seem empty, but anything can still happen. She had been thrown out, alone and desperate, with nowhere left to turn. The cold night air bit into her skin as she stumbled down the street. Every step felt heavier than the last. Then in the distance a single door stood open, barely a crack, but enough to see inside. She hesitated, then knocked. The sound echoed softly in the quiet night. What happened next was nothing like she expected. The door swung wide. Standing there was a man, his face weathered, his presence commanding. Tattoos sprawled across his arms, leather jacket creaking as he shifted. A Hell's Angel, unmistakably. Not the kind of person you'd invite in during your darkest hour, yet somehow this was her last chance. Let's rewind a bit. This isn't just about a desperate woman knocking on a stranger's door. It's a story about survival, about unlikely allies, and about what happens when judgment takes a back seat to humanity. Her name was Lily, 28, with a past she'd rather forget, but couldn't. The last few years had been a downward spiral, a toxic relationship, a dead-end job, losing her home. That night, after a final argument that left her with nowhere to go, she was out on the streets with only the clothes on her back and a heart full of hope that she didn't deserve to have. Lily had grown up hearing about the Hell's Angels like they were some kind of urban myth, dangerous, violent, unpredictable. But desperation has a way of breaking down those walls. When she saw the light under that door, she didn't think twice. The man who answered was named Jack. 52, with a past painted in leather and ink, but with eyes that told stories of a lifetime lived hard and lessons learned harder. He didn't ask questions. He didn't judge. Instead, he stepped aside, letting her in. That night, in a small room filled with the low hum of muffled music and the smell of worn leather and cigarette smoke, Lily found something she never expected. Safety. This isn't a fairy tale. It's not about instant redemption. It's about what happens when people step beyond the labels society places on each other and offer something simple, kindness. But who are the Hell's Angels, really? And what would make someone like Jack open his door to a stranger on the coldest night of the year? The Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club started in 1948 in California as a group of motorcycle enthusiasts craving freedom and brotherhood in a post-war America that felt stiff and constrained. Over the decades, they've been painted as outlaws, rebels, criminals, and sometimes saviors. Their reputation is as complex as the ink on their arms, and the truth has layers few dare to look beneath. Jack's chapter wasn't just a club for him. It was family, a tight-knit group where loyalty was everything. And just like any family, they looked out for their own. That night, as Lily warmed herself by a cracked heater, Jack didn't offer platitudes. He simply listened. She told him about the night she was thrown out, the things she lost, the hope she was trying to cling to. He shared stories, not to boast, but to show her that survival often meant falling down and choosing to get back up again and again. This moment, two strangers brought together by fate and desperation, was a turning point. Over the following weeks, Lily found herself spending more time at the clubhouse. It wasn't long before she realized these weren't the monsters she thought. They were flawed, sure, but fiercely protective of those they cared about. Jack helped her find a job through contacts he trusted. Not an easy gig, but a start. Slowly, she began to piece her life back together. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a while, she wasn't walking it alone. Stories like Lily's challenge the way we think about people, the labels we slap on them before we really know their story. The Hell's Angels are often portrayed in black and white, but this story is a reminder of the gray. Of course, it's important to understand the full picture. The Hell's Angels have had their share of controversies, legal troubles, violent confrontations, and a reputation that scares many. But beyond the headlines and sensationalized news reports are individuals, people with regrets, hopes, and a complicated mix of right and wrong. Lily's story isn't unique, and it's worth exploring why. America, like many places, has a growing number of people who find themselves on the fringes, homeless, vulnerable, judged. In many cases, the people we think of as outsiders or dangerous are the ones stepping in to help when no one else will. The clubhouse where Lily found shelter wasn't a shelter by any official definition. There were no signs, no advertisements. It was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where a community that the world often shunned took care of their own, and sometimes the lost souls that wandered through their doors. Hell's Angels chapters across the country have been known to help in unexpected ways, organizing charity rides for children with cancer, raising money for local communities, helping victims of natural disasters. These stories don't dominate the news, but they exist. It begs a question. How often do we overlook acts of humanity because they come wrapped in a package we don't recognize? How often do we let fear and stereotypes stop us from seeing the good in people? When Lily knocked on that door, she was met with hesitation, a brief pause where two worlds collided. But Jack chose to open up, to listen. Not because of some grand gesture, but because at the core, he understood what it meant to be lost. That night, she saw something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Jack's world was far from perfect. The club had rules, strict codes, and a history that wasn't always clean. But within those walls was a brotherhood that meant something. Loyalty, protection, a hard-earned sense of belonging. For Lily, that was the beginning of a lifeline. With Jack in the club, she slowly rebuilt the shattered pieces of her life. She wasn't just a charity case. She was family. The story of being thrown out at midnight and knocking on the door of a Hell's Angel isn't just one of survival. It's a story about how sometimes the people we fear the most are the ones most willing to help, to give a hand when the world turns its back. It reminds us that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes all it takes is one knock on a stranger's door. Lily's journey with Jack and the Hell's Angels wasn't overnight transformation. It was slow, messy, filled with setbacks, but also breakthroughs. She discovered that beneath the tough exteriors and rumbling engines were people who carried their own scars, who had known hardship up close. Some had lost family, battled addiction, faced prison time, but many had also chosen to build something out of brokenness. Loyalty, respect, and a sense of purpose. Jack became a kind of mentor, though it wasn't the kind you'd find in a classroom or office. His lessons were raw and real. He showed her how to stand up after falling, how to keep moving forward even when the world seemed indifferent. Not with empty pep talks, but with quiet example. He never told her what to do. Instead, he let her learn it herself, sometimes by watching. There was one night in particular that stands out. Lily had been working a day job, something steady but hard, and was exhausted. She doubted herself, wondered if she could really change her story. Jack noticed, pulled her aside after a meeting of the club. "You're tougher than you think," he said simply. "Just don't give up on yourself. That's all I'm asking." It sounds simple, and maybe it is. But for someone who'd spent years feeling invisible, those words carried weight. The Hell's Angels clubhouse itself became a sanctuary in a way. No flashy decor, just the hum of engines, the smell of oil and smoke, the crackle of laughter and shared stories. People who, by society's standards, might be called outlaws, were in that room offering support. They didn't pretend life was perfect, but they faced it together. This dynamic wasn't lost on Lily. In fact, it challenged her. She began questioning a lot, her assumptions, her fears, the stories she'd told herself about who people were based on labels or looks. People like Jack and the others lived complicated lives. Yes, they had made choices that many wouldn't agree with. But that complexity was part of what made them human. They weren't just symbols of rebellion or danger. They were individuals who understood pain, loyalty, and the need for belonging. And what Lily needed most in that moment was to belong. As her confidence grew, so did her connection with the club. She didn't become a Hell's Angel. That's a title earned with time and strict rules. But she did earn respect. She was invited to rides, to events, to gatherings. When people asked, she spoke honestly about where she'd been and the unexpected kindness she'd found. Her story rippled out quietly among the chapters, a reminder that sometimes rescue comes from the least expected places. It wasn't always easy. Some nights she wrestled with doubts. Could she really leave her past behind? Was she simply borrowing time before life knocked her down again? But Jack and the others never pushed her. They were steady, consistent, like a rock she could lean against. One afternoon, months after that first knock on the door, Lily sat with Jack outside the clubhouse. Engines rumbled softly as the Hell's Angels prepared for a charity ride. Children from the community had been invited, and Lily noticed the genuine smiles on everyone's faces. This wasn't the picture painted by news reports or movies. Jack looked at her and said, "We're not all bad. Sometimes the world just forgets the good we do." It was a simple truth, but for Lily, it was powerful. Her transformation didn't erase her past, but it changed her future. She found purpose. She found people who believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. The chaos of that midnight, being thrown out and left with nothing, had led to a new beginning. This story isn't meant to glamorize one group or stereotype another. It's about the messy reality of human connection, about how judgment too often shuts down possibilities, about how kindness can pierce through walls we build around ourselves. Lily's experience with the Hell's Angels shows that sometimes people who seem the most unlikely to help are exactly the ones who will. It also raises uncomfortable questions. How often do we let fear and media narratives shape the way we see others? How many stories are lost because we refuse to look past the surface? When we hear Hell's Angels, we think biker gangs, crime, rebellion. But that's one part of a much larger picture. These clubs have deep histories, ridden with complexity. Members range from lifelong riders who live by a code of honor to those whose paths have been darker. Just like any organization, their stories are layered. Yet within those layers, there are moments of grace. For Lily, the night she knocked on that door was the moment everything pivoted. It was the difference between fading away and fighting to reclaim her life. She's not the only one. Stories like hers are whispered in corners of towns across the country, of people finding refuge with groups once dismissed as dangerous or unredeemable. It challenges us to think differently about community and who we turn to when all else fails. Of course, not every story ends in a happy place. The reality of life on the fringes is often harsh. But for those who dare to open the door and offer help, those moments of connection can be life-changing. Jack once told Lily, "We all have demons, but some of us just wear our armor a little louder." That armor, the tattoos, the leather, the roar of engines, it's a shield, but behind it are real people with real hearts. As Lily slowly built her new life, she also began to see the world differently. She recognized that people, like stories, aren't always what they seem at first glance. Underneath the surface, everyone has a struggle, everyone needs connection. The midnight when she was thrown out could have been the end of her story. Instead, it was the beginning of something different. A chapter filled with grit, courage, and unexpected kindness. And all it took was one knock on a door. In the grand scheme of things, this story reminds us that sometimes help doesn't come from where we expect it. Sometimes survival means trusting a stranger's kindness, even when everything in your life says not to. It's a lesson worth remembering in a world quick to judge and slow to understand. So next time you think of someone on the margins, or a group with a reputation, maybe pause. Maybe remember Lily, and that cold night when a Hell's Angel answered the door, not with suspicion, but with a hand extended. Because sometimes that's all it takes to start rewriting a life. Lily's story, while extraordinary, also invites us to consider the hidden networks of support that exist everywhere, often unseen and unrecognized. The world can feel cold and unforgiving, especially late at night when the streets are empty and your options are running out. But sometimes those moments of desperation bring us closer to unexpected sources of strength. What Lily experienced wasn't a one-off miracle. Across countless cities, there are pockets where people labeled as outcasts or rebels have built communities grounded in fierce loyalty and mutual care. These networks often operate under the radar, leaning on each other in ways the wider world doesn't notice. And in many cases, they're more effective at providing real help than official systems that are stretched thin or don't know how to respond to complex needs. This raises important questions about how society handles vulnerability and crisis. When someone like Lily is thrown out at midnight, who is ready to catch her? Emergency shelters can be crowded or unsafe. Family ties might be broken or non-existent. The social safety net is frayed or missing in places. So where do people turn? In Lily's case, that answer came in the form of a Hell's Angel named Jack. But it could have been anyone willing to look beyond stereotypes and offer help without judgment. That willingness to see someone in need, not as a problem, but as a person, is where healing begins. Jack's own life was a testament to this philosophy. His rough exterior and tattoos told a story of a man who had made mistakes, paid hardship's price, and come out the other side with hard-earned wisdom. When Lily arrived at his door, he recognized that same hunger for a fresh start, the kind that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't come neatly packaged. Over time, the relationship between Lily and Jack grew beyond that first act of kindness. It became a partnership, a mutual understanding born out of respect. Jack saw in Lily not just a woman down on her luck, but someone with resilience and potential. Lily saw in Jack and the club a community that embraced imperfection and insisted on loyalty. She began to understand what it meant to belong somewhere, truly belong. That sense of belonging is something many people in her position crave but rarely find. It's easy to lose faith when the world keeps saying you don't fit, you're disposable, or you're a burden. But the Hell's Angels clubhouse was something different. It was a place where she was acknowledged, where her struggles were met with empathy instead of scorn. This transformation led Lily down paths she hadn't imagined possible months earlier. She started attending vocational classes, helped by club members who had connections, took part in community outreach programs the club organized, and slowly reclaimed her confidence. One evening after a particularly long day, Lily sat out on the steps of the clubhouse watching the sun set over the city skyline. Jack joined her, handing over a cup of coffee. "Never thought I'd find anyone like you knocking on my door," he said with a half smile. "But I'm glad you did." That moment encapsulated the unexpected beauty that can emerge from the darkest hours. Two people from wildly different worlds, connected by a simple act of trust. Yet this story doesn't erase the realities both Lily and Jack faced. The Hells Angels, like many motorcycle clubs, operate in a space filled with contradictions. Loyalty and violence, compassion and toughness, family bonds and rebellion. It's a complicated mix that defies easy explanation. For Lily, navigating this world meant accepting its complexities. It wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about integrating all parts of herself, including the parts that had been broken or forgotten. The club didn't fix her overnight, but it gave her a grounding, an anchor when the storm threatened to pull her under. The community she found there gave her purpose beyond survival. She volunteered in their charity events, helped organize rides, and even began mentoring other women who were struggling like she had. That cycle of giving back became a vital part of her healing. Meanwhile, Jack and others in the club took pride in these moments of positive impact. Despite the public image painted by media and law enforcement, many members saw themselves as protectors of their communities, standing up where institutions failed. They understood that loyalty wasn't just about sticking together, it was about lifting each other up. This story also highlights how crucial human connection is when someone hits rock bottom. Society tends to view homelessness and hardship through statistics and policy debates, but at the heart of it, these are stories about people craving dignity, respect, and safety. Lily's experience challenges the stereotypes we often carry about both the vulnerable and the groups deemed dangerous or other. It's a reminder that life isn't black and white, and that real compassion requires looking past labels. Her story also reveals the cracks in the systems supposed to help people in crisis. When traditional support structures fail or fall short, communities like the Hells Angels step in, not because they want to replace official care, but because sometimes they're the only ones who show up. This reality is complicated and uncomfortable. It forces a reckoning with the fact that our society often excludes those who most need help, and those perceived as threats sometimes fill that void. In the months and years following that pivotal night, Lily transformed, carefully and imperfectly. She rebuilt relationships with people from her past, secured stable housing with support from local nonprofits, and found a career that gave her both stability and meaning. But she never forgot the door Jack opened that night, nor did she forget the lessons learned in the smoky back rooms of a motorcycle clubhouse, the lessons about survival, loyalty, and second chances. Her story is a testament to the power of unexpected kindness and the ways in which human connection can heal even the deepest wounds. It challenges us all to reconsider who we trust and who we help, to remember that sometimes the people we fear most have the biggest hearts, and sometimes when all else fails, one knock on the right door can change everything. As Lily's life began to settle into this new rhythm, she also came face to face with the realities that still lurked beneath the surface. The Hells Angels didn't erase her past, nor did they shield her completely from the challenges that come with trying to move forward. There were moments of doubt and fear, instances where old habits threatened to take hold, and times when the weight of judgment from friends, family, and society pressed heavily on her. What kept her going was the genuine connection she found within that clubhouse and the steady presence of people who'd seen their own darkness but chose to keep pushing anyway. Jack wasn't perfect. None of them were. But they understood pain and resilience in a way few others did. One rainy evening, Lily found herself sitting beside Jack outside the clubhouse, the heavy drops soaking through the pavement as motorcycles revved inside. She opened up about her fears, that despite everything, she might never fully escape the pattern of instability. Jack looked at her without judgment. "It ain't about never falling," he said quietly. "It's about learning how to get up, every damn time." Those words stayed with her like a quiet mantra during the tough days that followed. She realized that recovery and rebuilding life aren't about perfection. They're about persistence. Over time, Lily began to embrace more than just survival. She worked toward thriving. She enrolled in courses, began saving money, and reconnected with people from her past in ways that built rather than broke her down. The clubhouse, with its rough edges and roaring engines, became a symbol not just of her refuge, but of her transformation. Her story also had an impact on the Hells Angels themselves. While outsiders often view the club through a lens of suspicion and fear, the members learned from her as well. They saw how they could challenge their own narratives, providing not just a sanctuary for themselves, but a bridge to the wider community. Events organized by the club became moments where they worked to dismantle negative stereotypes, hosting charity rides, helping rebuild after natural disasters, and opening their doors to vulnerable people seeking refuge. These actions, small yet significant, painted a more nuanced picture of the group, a brotherhood that balanced loyalty with compassion, toughness with generosity. Lily's experience reminds us of something crucial. No one's story is simple, and no one is defined solely by their past mistakes or the labels others put on them. People are complicated, capable of both harm and healing, and sometimes the people society fears are among those best equipped to offer salvation. it also points to a larger truth about human nature, the need to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted. For Lily, the Hells Angels clubhouse was more than just a safe space. It was a place where she found respect and a chance to be part of something bigger. The night she knocked on that door at midnight wasn't just a turning point in her life. It was a moment that upended assumptions. It forced a reconsideration of what community looks like and who deserves our trust. Her story invites reflection on how we respond to people in crisis. It challenges us to look beyond appearances and media portrayals, to recognize the humanity in everyone, especially those cast out or feared. In the end, Lily's journey from being thrown out onto the street at midnight to finding hope behind the door of a Hell's Angel is a powerful narrative about resilience, unexpected kindness, and the complex nature of redemption. It asks us to consider, how many other nights have similar stories unfolded, hidden from view? How many other doors, like Jack's, have been opened quietly to someone in need? Perhaps the most important lesson is this. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage and compassion come not from perfect places, but from imperfect people willing to show up anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start changing a life.